Rock and roll. Here we are, the third trial on sending my stories out. I'm honored and feel very blessed to be able to do this, and some of it's for me. The best stories are yet to come, of course. My formative years and things might only be of interest to my immediate family, if them. And I always loved my family extra. I think as an only child, you seek out, of course, approval. And uh, I always felt I was pretty good at weaseling love, and not everybody loves you, and that's a tough lesson of life. But I was very blessed, and uh, maybe I'll start today with how I got my name. In the mid to late 30s, Grandpa was working at the Ovaltine repairing barrels. Grandpa was a barrel maker, a cooper by trade, and they were still shipping. And when I was a little kid living at the grandparents' house, uh, barrels from Switzerland for the Ovaltine batch. They malted grains, and Ovaltine was extraordinarily popular at the time. So anyhow, Grandpa worked at the Ovaltine, and as did my beloved cousin Steve's maternal grandpa, uh, Emil Bierndorf. And Grandpa, though, was in the habit of having a schluck. He'd he'd drink before he'd go to work. And I had a uncle. There were four kids in the family, and Grandma had four kids, and the youngest one was named Richie. And Grandpa would drop him off for school, then along the way, and then go to the Ovaltine. Well, this particular morning in the late 30s, it was snowing up a storm, and it was a whiteout virtually. And in those days, there weren't crossing gates. They had crossing guards with two little paddles that would direct traffic across the railroad crossing. And Grandpa was a thick headed dude, and the guy told him to stop. And Grandpa was the kind of dude that didn't stop until he got to where he was going. And he got hit by the train. The Wunderkind, the special boy, who was captain of the football team, class president, had National Merit Scholar, had all these acknowledgments, and was going to be a very, very special young fella, was robbed of his life. And Grandpa was in a coma for more than a month, I believe, never woke up. And Grandma makes sure Grandpa's life was a living hell from then on. Um, there was an old story of Grandpa would take the wagon loads of tomatoes to the market on Randolph Street, or one of those markets down there. And he got the highest price of the year for his tomatoes, one crop. And at that farm, my poor mother in Wally had the job of cramming cornmeal down Goose's neck to make very big livers for liver pate. And Uncle Wally, I remember telling a story, hearing of his being pinned by a geese and being almost pecked to death as a small child. So, anyhow, we we had this cantankerous relationship between Grandma and Grandpa. Grandma would always tell Grandpa, "Ed, there's the door," and uh, the rumor was for years she tried to spread that Grandpa pushed her in the bathtub and where she slipped and fell, and then Grandpa said he never did it. One of Grandma's most embarrassing moments was she got stuck in the bathtub and couldn't get out. And Ed was old and feeble and in his 90s, and he couldn't get her out. So Susie went in and she couldn't get her out. And so finally they had to call the male testosterone in to hank Grandma out of the bathtub. And she modestly draped a towel across her front and tried to bear the burden of the inconvenience of her demise there. But I guess about the last 10 years of their life, they lived at our house, and uh, intermittently, uh, Margaret and Grandma would get together, although they were like fire and water and never did get along good. And that's why I took care of the old timers. It was never laborious for me. Susie was telling Steve the story of how I had to cut their toenails and what exciting experience it was, and how they'd prep for a half hour ahead of time. They'd soak their toenails, and they had the ugliest feet in creation. Their toes were all gnarled and their nails were growing in, and it was almost always a blood giving event. It was an impossible job to try and do. And they lovingly would help me in the garden. And I think grandma worked there almost daily. And Ed's lesson in cleaning the weeds in the garden was you take the number of rows you have and you divide it by 7. And then every night in the cool of the evening, you'd go out and do the rows that you had, whether it be 2, 3, 4, 5, how many ever you had. You cleaned up those rows. Grandpa was an interesting character, and the second time, one time when Grandpa was coming back with the cash from the market, the gypsy ladies took all his money. And I'm sure he wasn't there for a palm reading. But then a terrible thing happened, Grandpa told me. Grandma took charge of the money, and he said she gave it all away. And Grandma, by the end of her life, had given away all her choice material goods and was working um, to be kind and fair to everyone. So we took our precious things, her baking pans, and I think I have one of her mixing bowls or two small ones in there that you probably got at the Jewel food store for coupons for buying groceries. So Grandpa would ask us to take him to Walgreens, and we would break the covenant of sneaking Ed over and Grandma would give Ed from his own Social Security check only $10 a month. And Grandpa would sneak out, and with us, we'd go to Walgreens. He'd buy a quart jug of port wine, the highest proof wine you could buy, and then a case of beer. And he wouldn't make it usually for the full month, but depended on how many cocktails I would serve up at supper time. And he was never one to pass up a drink, nor was his daughter, my mother, Margaret. Not that Margaret was never abusive of alcohol. She might have been at one time when she was very old, and uh, I think she did want to escape and drank too much booze at towards the end of her life in her last years of living alone. And one time when after mom had broken her hip and broken both hips and was at the home for permanent, she we went at Thanksgiving and we offered her a drink and she didn't take it. And then Christmas rolled around and she remembered she didn't get her drink then at that holiday. And Susan down the road from us would uh, be a steady visitor to mom. She loved mom and she loved mom's counsel and uh, how to deal with things. And she was very kind and special to mom. So, anyhow, uh, I think I'll stop there and we'll pick up some more of the Air family stuff maybe next time. Hugs to all those that Susie and I love, and we hope you have a wonderful holiday season more than anything, enjoying your life and growing as humanoids. We strongly recommend YouTube as we educate ourselves into this millennium with a broader knowledge base than we ever thought possible. Susie tells the story of uh, one of her science teachers saying, well, they were talking about the slide rule, and the teacher says, well, you're not going to be able to carry a calculator around in your pocket. Now we have the world's knowledge in our pocket. What an unbelievable experience. Hugs and love, Richie and Susie. Adios from New Mexico.